It's Gabs from Port Engage Walter. Thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome to of the show. We're going to be here for the next couple of minutes talking all things business, from the country to of the world. Now, the African Continental Free Trade Area has come into effect from July 2020. And, a single market of 1.3 billion people has been expected to grow to 2.5 billion by 2050. This is a very interesting conversation to look out for, looking at the fact that currently trade between African nations, between 15% and 18%, total trade, have gone against 69 in Europe as well as 59 in Asia, to ensure for this one. Tariffs also of 90% of all goods are to be removed. This is a conversation that many sit and ask themselves, are we going to be able to survive as a nation? Are we going to be able to survive as an economy? Will Africa be able to survive? There's to mention about a few. And on today's show, we will be having a serial entrepreneur, a founder of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom, a man who has succeeded in Botswana business sector and transitioned into real estate tycoon. Trust me, there's a lot that we can say about this man because his businesses come so from afar, from being a lawyer to being a businessman, having to own, great stuff out in the CBD. There's a lot that I can say, but, most of them are best off being told by the owner, Mompoloki. Mogobe, thank you so much for joining us. Mompoloki. Right. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to believe all is well on your side, sir.
All is well. Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel honored and privileged.
Right. Let's talk about now your portfolio. Break it down for us just so people can understand, the in-depth of what our conversation is going to be about.
Well, I have a great interest in international trade. Almost like a different lifetime ago when I was in America, I did a master's degree, an LLM in the area of international trade and banking. What I discovered shortly after I came back when I opened my own legal practice, at that time, one could not specialize in matters of international trade. Our economy was still undeveloped. And as a lawyer, I couldn't afford to specialize, but I always had a passion in international trade and banking. So over the years, as I developed my law firm, the practice Lerumo Mogobe legal practitioners, it is something that I was very passionate about. So I was happy to see the coming into existence of the conversion from OAU to AU, which we had, and then I've seen a series of progressions that have led to the realization of the big dream now. When I call it the big dream, it's a dream that goes back to 1963 in Addis Ababa, when the likes of Kwame Nkrumah were there, the likes of Haile Selassie were there, and they made a lot of wonderful speeches. The most memorable of which was the one that was made by Kwame Nkrumah, in which he said, political independence is worthless, in effect, without economic independence. And thereby, started off the whole idea of the Africa Free Trade Area. That has always been a dream of our forefathers. So in terms of my portfolio, yes, I've gravitated towards, as a lawyer, obviously, I'd like to think that we set up one of the largest law practices in the country, one of the most successful. But I realized that law could not feed my children the way I wanted. And over time, through the process of personal development, I set up Mogobe Incorporated, which has spurned other businesses. But Mogobe Inc. is largely a property development and property investment company. So we have a number of assets, and we have a number of units that we control. And we have other businesses that we run, such as Black, which I've seen you visiting once.
Once too many times.
And Nonas, and we're also interested in hospitality and so on. But I'm very fascinated about international trade. That's why I have a great fascination with the creation of the Africa Free Trade Agreement and Free Trade Area. The agreement is supposed to lead to the creation of the Free Trade Area, which is a 34-year project in terms of the target date by which this should have happened.
I would like us to break it down, when we talk about the free trade framework. Maybe let's break it down in simple terms.
Well, the whole idea is that, as you may have be aware, African countries are only trading between themselves to the extent of 15%.
Yeah.
And if you compare with North Africa, you compare with, the Far East and other areas, including the EU, you find that we are the least in-term trading entities in the world. And the African leaders realize that this is a handicap. There are reasons for this, but there's a realization that something has to be done. Yeah. Only 15 or 16% of the trade between ourselves. That's unhealthy.
Yeah.
It is easier to sell something to the European Union or to some other entity, maybe even through AGOA. It might be easier to penetrate North Africa, the USA, than it would be to trade amongst ourselves because of barriers of different kinds, some of which are tariffs, some of which are non-tariff barriers. So we can talk about both the tariff barriers and the non-tariff barriers, both of which have to be removed for us to be able to trade together.
Yeah. In terms of tariffs, they've caused a bit of a distance also in terms of businesses between countries. Maybe let's talk about the barriers that are there. What is it that exactly are we talking about for us to understand why certain decisions or certain tariffs have gone up, or some have just been told, this is a no-go zone?
I don't know. To answer your question, let's understand what tariffs are.
Yeah.
Tariffs are an imposition by states, which are more or less like a tax.
Yeah.
Which says for you to bring certain types of goods, you have to pay X amount. There would be rates based on the type of goods involved. If, for instance, an area wants to protect, a country wants to protect its infant industries, they would impose a large, barrier, a large tariff against a particular item. So what has happened is that as regional bodies like SADC, like we belong to two that have come to mind, regional economic zones or economic trading areas. The ones that come to mind are the SADC and also the Common Customs Union. You know that we can't just bring, let's say, vehicles for argument's sake, without paying monstrous tariffs in order to protect the motor industry in Botswana. So African leaders and African countries have realized that there's need to remove some of these barriers. They're making it very difficult. You cannot just bring things easily into Botswana, for instance, or from any African country. Like I said to you earlier, it is even easier to trade with far-flung areas than it is to trade amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
So those are clearly tariff barriers that are visible. There are non-tariff barriers that we can talk about, which would include infrastructural limitations, absence of security. For instance, it's well known in the DRC that you can't really penetrate that area by road that easily. You have to fly from this area to that area to that area. So African countries are saying we have to be conscious about this and urge countries to create infrastructural development, create roads, to create systems by which trade can flow inter-country. So that's an example of a non-tariff barrier that needs to be addressed. And there are issues of security as well. That's a non-tariff barrier that has to be addressed. Indeed, the agreement talks about those as well.
Yeah. Now, the question then is, where do you see Botswana fitting into the larger vision of this conversation?
Well, Botswana has not ratified the agreement, but they have signed the agreement. There's a difference. Signing is to signal and to trigger certain actions to show that Botswana is committed to the agreement, but ratification is where the agreement now becomes part of the domestic law of Botswana and is then triggered to come into effect. When I spoke to our chief negotiator, Rebutale, and we appeared together in the I program the other day on BTV, his expectation was that they have to tighten some screws, they have to do certain things, and the expectation was, at the time we spoke, I think it was around February, was that it might take 6 months for Botswana to ratify.
Yeah.
The immediate result of ratification is that now the process will be starting to make it possible for us to take those baby steps to do certain things, for regional organizations to now start working on the removal of barriers, and perhaps to start looking at things like, removal of, travel restrictions. As you know, certain countries require visas, and some of those visas have to be set aside to enable business persons to travel from one country to the other. My understanding is that other countries which have already ratified are already showing interest. And one of the things Mr. Butali mentioned is that a country such as Egypt have indicated that, we're looking for certain things that you have, goats, and he mentioned a whole lot of other things that already Egypt is saying, can you supply this, Botswana? So countries are beginning to take those initial steps. So I'm urging the government, I'm urging our country to ratify the agreement so that we can just, through the process of trial and error, start experimenting and opening up and start moving. Perhaps you and I will go to Rwanda to look for opportunities. From there, we go to Abuja to see what opportunities are available. But the first step is for ratification to take place so that the trade can be initiated. Possibilities for trade can now be initiated.
But are we well capacitated as an economy, as a country, to service such markets?
Well, the answer is yes and no. We're, with a small population of 2.3, and the agreement actually envisages this. There might be need to protect certain areas and to walk slowly. And there are mechanisms, there are certain protections that are put in place. For instance, there's an anti-competitive, there's a whole provision in the agreement that deals with anti-competitive practices and deals with the issues of competition, and there are also issues of consumer protection, where some of our we may need to amend certain clauses in our Consumer Protection Act, for instance, but the overall framework says that there's need for countries to look out for themselves. So it's not as if on the first day or the first few years it will be free for all. My view is that yes, if we cooperate with each other as countries, we will become capacitated and be able to deal with the other markets. I was talking to a young lady the other day on Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom. She manufactures cosmetics. She manufactures beauty products. She's already looking to how to protect her IP and to register IP protection across the continent using the framework of the Berne Convention. I won't go into that now. But also at the same time, the idea is that she'll be able, once the ratification has taken place, once the government now has said no, you can start trading. Businessmen, SMMEs, you can go out there and start seeing what you can supply, what you can source from other African countries. People are already positioning themselves for that purpose. So to answer your question, is Botswana capacitated? Yes and no. I'll go back to my answer.
Where do we see the potential pitfalls, though?
In the entire framework? Obviously, there might be economies which are a lot bigger than us. I mean, take Nigeria, depending on who you're looking at, it's over 200 million. Depending on where you read, whether it's Wikipedia or elsewhere, the numbers.
The sources are just important.
So there is obviously an obvious risk of being overwhelmed by the sheer force of numbers and the sheer level of sophistication of the market. And obviously already the imbalances that exist between us and South Africa in terms of, which are being addressed within the context of this SACU, those issues will still be there. And in terms of relaxing the barriers that exist, we have to be cautiously optimistic. We have to step, cautiously. So that is where, from my understanding, if you talk to Borre Butali, the government is forever mindful. And these are issues that were brought in. I'll give you an example. When the agreement was first signed by a majority of countries in 2018, Nigeria delayed Do you know why Nigeria delayed in signing?
No.
They actually literally stopped for some time. It was all over the news. The reason they delayed is that the Nigerian business community objected to certain things in the agreement, and there was need to bring them on board. Similarly, my understanding is that the likes of, Business Botswana, in the case of Botswana, business persons represented by Business Botswana have been brought in to be part of the negotiation process. So the pitfalls are obviously if government goes ahead and does certain things without involving the business community and ensuring that the business community is part and parcel of the entire process. That's where the possible pitfalls, in my view, might arise.
Yeah.
So there's need for the private sector and the government to go step by step, lockstep together in unison as the agreement is being implemented.
Yes. I want us to take a step back now. Earlier on, we did talk about, opportunities that may come your way. One of these becomes, one of the industries that come into mind for me is manufacturing. We've seen it grow at a rapid pace. And it's something that you sit and you say, but why didn't you do this 10 years ago and everything? Could this trade now lead to a robust manufacturing sector? And even mention other sectors that are there.
Yeah, we have our manufacturing capacity has actually grown, in my judgment, the last 5 to 10 years. There was a time when chewing gum was the only thing that we're, in my observation, that we're exporting on a large scale. We are manufacturing a lot of chewing gum. G West in Commerce Park.
Wow.
That there's a company that manufactures. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention the name. Bubble gum, chewing gum.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things that were consistently growing, apart from diamonds. But you've seen the likes of Flowtech come in, where companies like that are doing over $1 billion worth of business a year in terms of selling to foreign markets. And we see now as I said, I gave you an example of a local company that has been run by 2 young women, which manufactures cosmetic products. So they're looking at this agreement as a launching pad for them to go out to Africa. So yes, manufacturing is certainly one area where possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
But I also see, as someone coming from the construction industry, the real estate industry, I see construction as a huge potential area. I was reading a story about a guy who came from, is it Cameroon or Ghana, and went to Nigeria, and is literally setting up townships and setting up large, vast developments. Coming from a foreign country to set up in that particular locality. So there's no reason why our established property companies. When I last checked, there were 5 listed property companies would not go further into Africa. Some of them, like I don't think I'm allowed to mention names. Some of them are already, setting up hotels, setting up developments. I've heard of a development in Mauritius, done by a Botswana company. I know of a Botswana company that is doing large developments in Cape Town. So I think construction is one area that is maybe overlooked, because possibilities of going to where cement is easily available or readily available at a relatively low price, and then putting up structures there raises the possibility of potentially successful ventures being undertaken by local companies. So those are the areas that I see. Then of course there's ICT.
Yes.
ICT also. Yes, you'll see a lot of that, and there are already companies that I'm aware of that have actually started doing business outside Africa, outside Botswana, and the rest of Africa, coming from Botswana. So and we know that already, even before this agreement came into existence, there were 2 significant listed companies that had established themselves in foreign markets. So So my take is that with this agreement coming into force, and with it being about to be ratified, there's going to be an explosion. I certainly would like to believe that there's going to be like an explosion in manufacturing. The excuse of saying, Botswana, we are only 2.3 million.
Is not.
That excuse will disappear in the context of this agreement, because now we're not just talking about 2.3 million people in Botswana. We're talking about 1.3 billion people throughout Africa. To put that in perspective, we're talking about populations that are comparable to India and comparable to China.
You know, we're talking about foreign direct investment right here, and it's quite an interesting conversation to look into. And you know, one just would like to, you know, to look into it, to say, to what extent now can we protect, because we are still in the process of all this, you know, how can we now ensure that we protect what we have and still try and play a fair card in this trading between different countries?
Well, that's something that we alluded to earlier.
Yeah.
Consumer protection, such that, you know, questionable products are not brought here and then swamp the country, and then we're not sold things that are not up to scratch.
Yeah.
We still have those consumer protection systems in place. So I believe, and the agreement provides for this, each country will still go through a rigorous system of ensuring that whatever products and services are brought in qualify and meet the standards that are in that country. So we have the likes of the competition authority as well, where if in fact somebody has a complaint against a particular conglomerate or monopoly, feeling that perhaps they're monopolizing or setting up a monopoly structure or enterprise within Botswana, something can be done about it. And I think the agreement, I can't remember the exact clause or provision in the agreement, it specifically addresses the risks and dangers associated with unfair competition and the risks and dangers associated with consumer protection. There are whole swaths of provisions in that agreement, and I think our lawyers are obviously are basically well aware or very alert to those provisions that can actually be invoked if there's need for us to protect our industries.
Yeah.
So the infrastructure is there, but obviously there's a famous saying that the devil is always in the detail. So really, we will know for sure when the implementation takes place. And I like the thinking in the agreement where they emphasize that the implementation has to be bottom up as opposed to top down.
Top down, yeah.
So there's an effort to ensure that the community and all the interested parties are brought in, that there's a buy-in from the community. My own suggestion is that once the agreement is ratified, the government should go on a countrywide mission, on a countrywide trip to conscientize Botswana and maybe to make them aware of this agreement.
Yeah.
They still need to quell some of the fears that you have. So I would urge that Masarame, if she's listening, or her ministry, make it a point to actually go on a road trip of some kind to raise awareness and to conscientize Botswana about this. Because if there's any danger that I see, it has to do with insufficient information or lack of awareness. People are not sufficiently conscientized about the agreement and what it has available for them.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a bit of it's a bit of a personal question in terms of the vision and when we forecast this change, if I could call it. We've seen COVID-19 changing how the game plays. We've seen how business operates in COVID-19. Is this change, or should I say, when we see the trade now coming into place, are we not going to be a resilient economy because we tend to be a bit slow in adapting?
One of the things that I've noticed about COVID-19 is that it has induced a short, sharp shock to the system.
Yeah.
It has actually reinvigorated our business community. And I've heard so many people come on the Nuggets of Wisdom and say that overall, COVID-19 has been a plus. From the point of what they call, quote unquote, the COVID dividend. So there's been that dividend associated with COVID-19. So when we shifted to the Africa Trade Agreement, yes, it has caused a bit of a setback in that the agreement was delayed, if I'm not mistaken, for about 7 or 8 months. It was supposed to have come into effect last year, but it only came into operation on the 1st of January this year. And when I last checked, 34 countries had ratified it. So there's need, because we're talking about 54 countries in Africa, isn't it? So there's need for the remaining countries, including Botswana, to ratify the agreement. And after that happens, then, in my view, we'll then be able to get a further dividend, a further benefit from these newly invigorated, entrepreneurs out there in the marketplace. The sense that I have is that people have been re-energized, people have been reawakened to the need to act now. I mean, there's a famous saying by Jesse Jackson, which says, and which I put to the entrepreneurs, if not now, when? And if not you, who? So if you ask yourself that question, and if you are entrepreneurially inclined, and if you are interested in taking advantage of this, I would really urge you to read the agreement, or to enlighten yourself by talking to lawyers or people who are already aware of this. I strongly suggest that if you are listening to this, you don't walk, but you run to the Ministry of Trade to ask officials who are handling this portfolio or dealing with the Africa Free Trade Agreement to find out how you can immediately take advantage of it and seek to implement it and get ready for the time it is fully ratified.
One prediction is that intra-regional trade could increase by 52.3% by 2020. This is according to the United Nations Economic Commission on Africa. The AU also believe that trade will increase by 60%. You can be a part of this conversation by calling us on 3956962. That's our studio line. SMS line 14962, plus our WhatsApp line on +267 3956962. We'll definitely be on the other side of this, wrapping up our conversation here, talking all of things to do with the African Continental Free Trade area. This is a conversation I'm having here with Mr. Mogobe on Gabs from Power to Engage World. With myself, Neo Skilo Awobe. On the other side of this, we're going to be quickly looking more into this conversation as well as wrapping it up. Hello, good evening. Thank you so much for being a part of the journey.
Power to engage your world is on 91.0 FM.
Who's that man calling me stranger in my land, my mama land? This is very funny, but it's only Skilo on Gabs FM who can get me to sing that song. Just done it.
Gabs from Power to Engage World. Thank you so much for tuning in. The show continues as we wrap up our conversation here surrounding the African trade. Kenal Jalo in studio with Mogobe. Thank you so much. The zest of this here conversation has been now on the international aspect, what it is that it means for Botswana to the world. I want us to talk about now the little sector. There's this sector that we hardly talk about to. The informal sector.
Okay.
But the informal sector has found itself doing a lot more into just the economy, to mention but a few. Maybe let's talk about how this the trading system provides a framework to improve the Botswana's trade domestic policy, and how it's going to affect this informal sector.
Yeah, it's obviously when the tide rises, all ships go up. I think there's a general saying. There's a recognition of that. Obviously, if large industries benefit, there will be a trickle-down effect to smaller industries. If I can just summarize for you the benefits of the whole scheme, and if I summarize them for you, you'll understand why and how the informal sector can benefit. The cost of doing business in Botswana will be greatly reduced automatically. What that means is that businesses will have a greater opportunity to spend in the local economy, and therefore this will trickle down to the informal sector. And the informal sector, you are talking about Bomasiape, you're talking about people who are selling airtime in the streets. If there's a vibrancy in the economy, obviously there's a trickle-down effect to them. The agreement will enhance competitiveness at industry and enterprise level by exploiting opportunities for economies of scale. In other words, for companies to scale as well. So that will have a trickle-down effect, needless to say. The agreement will make it possible to improve social welfare of people of Botswana, as there will be an increase in trade in the country, leading to better standard of living. Obviously, if the standard of living goes up, you're better able to spend on the informal sector. Let's look at what happened when COVID struck. The first people to be affected were the informal sector. There was a hue and cry from them, and similarly, when the economy improves and when the dynamism in the economy, there's economic activity, they will benefit. There will be more jobs to be created, which means there will be a greater likelihood of some of those people moving from the informal sector and being formally employed. For instance, when it comes to manufacturing, it's fairly easy to train someone who has not been set in their ways. Maybe someone from the informal sector can benefit. And I've heard other businessmen say that it's easier to train someone who is raw, who doesn't come from a particular discipline, and then get them to work. Speaking of manufacturing, where now we are, you find that for you to really compete internationally, you have to have a system of shifts. Botswana are used to the 8 to 4:30 system, or shall I say 7:30 to 4:30 or 8 to 5 system. When this thing really kicks in and manufacturing concerns start running, people have to get used to shifts. If you go to Floor Tech right now, when I was talking to my friend, the owner of Floor Tech, Mr. Nake, sometimes they have 2 shifts, sometimes they have 3 shifts. People working right through the night and sleeping through the day. So obviously, if that happens, there's more economic activity, there's more production, which, like I said, has a trickle-down effect. The value of goods themselves will come down if both the non-tariff barriers and the tariff barriers are reduced. The possibility of getting goods accessed at a lower cost will obviously benefit the informal sector. They will be able to improve themselves and to buy goods from outside cheaper as a result of that. I'm told that we have cars that are manufactured in Rwanda. If not only are those cars manufactured in Rwanda, but you can actually go to Rwanda without too much excessive barriers such as visas and whatnot, and then drive that vehicle 2 or 3 nights back to Botswana. That is doable, where the barriers are removed. Wouldn't you like, for instance, to be able to decide to start a business in Cameroon if you so wish, to start a business in Mozambique if you so wish? That is the overall idea. That is the purpose of this. Because remember that the borders that we have or the barriers that we have in terms of borders all started sort of in a whim in 1885 through the Berlin Conference, when these borders were just, and I even understand that the king of Belgium, when he took what became Zaire and is now known as the DRC, he just took a knife literally and cut through the map. This is my territory, and that was it. So a lot of the borders that we have now that have solidified in Africa were just artificial borders, the product of 1885. And this is an attempt by African leaders to reverse the damage and the harm that was done to the continent in 1885.
Yeah. Political instability is something we can't run away from. To what extent does political influence have on this trade area?
Well, we are relying on politicians because we are political entities. And it is indeed our politicians who got together and crafted this. The whole transition from, OAU to AU, and now the gradual transition to a common market, because that's what ultimately the Africa Free Trade area is all about. But that area is created by the Africa Free Trade Agreement, you understand? So politicians are involved, but politicians are now realizing that it's in their best interest as Africans to work together. They are realizing the dreams of the founding fathers, the Nkurumas of this world, the Seradzakamas of this world, the Haile Selassie of this world, that political independence is worthless without economic independence. So this addresses that. So yes, politics has a major role, and I'd like to believe that politicians recognize that it's in their own interest in this day where, countries are now integrated through the internet, where we are getting closer and closer together. Politicians have to actually give up some of their power, and the agreement anticipates that some governments have to lose some of their sovereign powers in terms of being able to control certain things. So, and we've learned from the likes of EU, the European Union, where you now ended up having Brexit, because it was felt that too much power was concentrated in Brussels, which is the headquarters of the European Union. We will have a lot to learn in terms of what problems to avoid from the example of Europe. We certainly don't want to see what I would coin as Boxit, Botswana exit, or Zamzit, whatever, any country exiting, because there's actually a provision, I forgot for a possible exit, provided we give 5 years, 5 to 10 years notice, something like that. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but all I'm trying to say is that yes, the politicians need to accept that some of their sovereign power will have to be ceded to the authority that governs the Africa Free Trade Agreement. Already there is a secretariat which is in the process of setting up mechanisms around that. So I'm glad you raised the political question, because it is really very, very, very important. And countries that accept that will be more prepared to ratify and to run with this agreement instead of just holding on to their little power at the expense of their community or their population.
Could we then see, the Trade Act, if I could call it, or whatever governs or constitutes to how trade happens within the country, being altered to try and do away with easing of doing business within each country?
Unavoidably.
Unavoidably,
there's going to be first the process of ratification really involves more or less the government of the country or the parliament of the country accepting, making the agreement part of the local law, such that it's something that you can try and enforce in court or whatever. But so unavoidably, yes, the local law has to be amended. Our consumer protection systems have to align. There's a lot of work that lawyers have to undertake, and I'm sure the government lawyers are very busy, and certainly private sector lawyers. I know for a fact a friend of mine who's very active in the IP space is already fielding questions and receiving clients who are addressing these issues. So indeed the law will have to be changed to accommodate this. And I think there's a provision in the Act. I forgot the number of the article, which makes provision for domestic law to be amended to align, or so that the local laws are congruent. I think that's the law.
Yeah, congruent. Yeah,
congruent with the Act, the Africa Free Trade Agreement.
Yeah. I would like us to quickly wrap up our conversation here, maybe looking now into your last words as to having to now take a look at how our conversation has been going. What can we expect, from us as Botswana business people in trying to at least prepare ourselves for the day that, the announcement is going to come and say, Botswana is here, guys. We've signed this agreement and we're ready to roll. What can we do in the meantime in terms of preparing ourselves as a business community?
Yeah, there's a famous phrase that you should really act local, but think global. In the sense that you may be here, but you have to already be thinking how you can expand. These days, everybody's talking about scaling.
Yeah.
You have companies. You are told that in this economy, for a company to survive, it has to be geared towards scaling. For a company to go anywhere, it has to be focused on growth. So I think the growth mindset has to come into the Botswana business person. They have to look at opportunities. I know that there's some Botswana businessmen who are already doing business in Ghana, even before the trade came into force. I know that there are businesses that are getting established in the likes of Zambia and so on and so forth. So those growth-minded companies are the ones that are likely to benefit the most. Like I mentioned earlier, it's important for SMMEs and small industries to familiarize themselves with the agreement and to ask questions from the authorities. People like Borre Butale need to come more. I believe you had him here recently.
Yeah.
And I was with him on a panel at BTV. We need to do that more. And we need to do more of what you are doing, which is invite industry leaders. And I've had Bomema Kwenewendo, who was involved in the actual negotiations of the agreement. I've had her on a Zoom call, sharing her wisdom, sharing her experiences. She's able to explain why we put this clause, why we removed this clause, why this is the way it is, what were the impetuses or the impetus behind certain sections. So we have people who are able to lead us along. So you as members of the press, you as journalists, need to help conscientize Botswana, raise awareness, and you need to go on top of the rooftops, as it were, and shout the loudest about this Africa Free Trade Agreement. The agreement is here, the area is coming. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when that we're going to do it and be ultimately one united Africa, one united free trade area.
Yes.
That is the objective. So get ready, businessmen, and get yourselves ready and do something about it.
And get ready now.
Now is the time.
If somebody would like to extend this conversation with you and also, other conversations that you can have, maybe you can let us know where we can find you.
Yeah, if I'm accessible on social media. I have several platforms in which I'm active. One is LinkedIn, under Mogobe, and then there's also Facebook, there's also Instagram, and there's of course the famous channel, which is Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. And dear listener, I'm urging you to subscribe if you haven't done so already, so that you may benefit. Twice a week, we have industry leaders, we have entrepreneurs, we have experts, we have the best, the creme de la creme, the top of the range, as it were, in terms of business leaders who are able to come and share wisdom. It's already aimed at that. I'm actually planning to bring Re Butale as well, so that even people from government who are leading this can share their wisdom and guide the public, so that we can embrace and accept the Africa Free Trade Agreement and the free trade, the concept of a free trade area.
All right, Lerumo, thank you so much for talking to us. We'll definitely be engaging you or more in seeing what is there for us as a nation moving forward and preparing ourselves. But other than that, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Right, and that's just to wrap up our conversation there with Mogobe on Gabs FM, having to talk all things to the African trade area conversation. An insightful one to look out for. So go out and prepare your businesses as early as now, and we can then have a great business for our people here in the beautiful country of Botswana. Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in.
Power to engage your world is on 91.0